Hello, and welcome to Coach Talk, the show more interested in ideas and philosophy than facts and history. My guest this week is Grant. He's the Global Director of Esports and Operations at Team Falcons. He's previously worked with teams like CLG, Guild, Splice, and Excel. We talked about the role and the skill of being a manager, how to develop yourself, and how to build a multi-year plan for an organization. Grant has held senior positions at many different esports organizations and has been instrumental in turning Falcons into a global player. He has a thought through and clear approach that is essential for those in his position. This episode is once again brought to you by quantify.gg. So for those that don't know, Coachify is a coaching platform that, alongside payments, scheduling, and practical things, makes tools for coaches. You can set up live VOD reviews, anchor your messages to specific timestamps and videos for future use, and even set up the auto tracking of goals with the Riot API pairing with solo queue. While I was working, even in the LEC, I was just using a pen and paper, so I understand that learning a new set of tools can be daunting. But with coaching as competitive as it's becoming, anything we can do to set ourselves apart is a fantastic opportunity. Now is as good a time as any to add something new to what you offer and make it as clear as possible for your players. So if you're interested in checking out coachify.gg, you can do so with the link below. They have a bunch of free options, which I suggest you check out first, although there are other tools more catered towards teams behind a paywall. If you do decide to look into Coachify, please drop me a message on Twitter or on Discord and let me know your feedback, as we're working together to try and create the best possible tools for coaches. And lastly, if you enjoy this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're interested in exploring mentoring or any of the other things I do to support coaches in the scene, you can follow me on Twitter, where you'll find all the other links that you'll need. And now, without further ado, Grant, what is coaching?
Coaching for me is all about getting the most out of the other people around you. So talk about esports, sports specifically. It is very much about helping that individual achieve their dreams by growing them, improving them, whatever it is they're doing in case of esports, in their video game playing. So it's the same word for me as a mentor. It's the same word for me as just like growth. It's all about you providing to someone else to help them be the best that they can be.
So does that mean in an organization, kind of everyone has some sort of coaching role?
I think so. I've always seen coaching as something that the word may be associated with sport, but in traditional working world, that would be boss, line manager, wherever it may be. In reality, they should be your coach, right? Yes, you're giving them tasks and this work that is done for the company, but you are, and your job is to help that individual grow, become better, and even surpass you at one point. And as long as someone else is growing you, everyone's moving up the lines and gaining for it. So for me, everybody in their life should be coached or getting coached, and it's no different to a traditional business.
And do you think it's either like one or the other, like you're getting coached or you're coaching, or is there a kind of
No,
joint?
not necessarily, because I mean, if I think of it just as traditional business, a ladder, if you're at the bottom, sure, you're being coached. Someone in the middle's got the boss above them, and they're leading people, so they're improving this way, whilst they're also giving out their techniques and learning the other way. But I also think it can be very much around helping those around you as well. You could be on the same level. If you think about sports team, you same positions on different positions on a pitch, but you're in the same team, same level, but you can still be giving each other tips, ideas. How can we help? How can we grow? How can we be a better team? That's a form of coaching as well. So the best people out there when it comes to coaching, mentors, bosses, whatever you want to call it, are always trying to give out information and provide help wherever they can, no matter like who it's to or what level it is.
Yeah, and that kind of organization, if you're in that environment where everyone's helping each other, I think it's just, it snowballs so quickly.
That's it. It creates the most successful organization around. Some of the biggest companies out there, Google and the like, have all these different management systems in place that are successful for a reason, and that's because it grows the staff constantly and consistent.
Mm.
And there's I'm probably extremely naive in saying this because it's not like I've had much exposure to the traditional working market, but I've seen enough startups now from the edge of esports, startups in gaming or on the fringes, to know who's going to be successful and who isn't regardless of the product, regardless of what's being made, because you can see within the individuals, you guys are going to go far because you're all trying to help each other grow each other, and there's no egos and there's no barriers. And it's like, your product's amazing, but it doesn't matter because you are unable to mentor or coach people, so nobody will work for you and you won't grow. It's funny how I've gotten older. It's actually really easy to see who is capable and who isn't.
Yeah, it reminds me, I'm a massive fan of Dave Brailsford, who was responsible for turning around British cycling as well as lots of other things. And he's brought the idea of marginal gains, which has been kind of, maybe overused and over exaggerated how important it is. But the really interesting thing is that actually it's now 2 decades ago, he was asked to explain what it is and what it means in practice. And that's the exact example he gave. He said, I know when we're really embodying marginal gains because I can go into the engineering room and I say, oh, I'm not sure that wheel's entirely straight. And before they would have said, piss off, Dave, you do your job, we'll do our.
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh, great, there's an opportunity to have a go and check and fix and get better. And if you have that environment where everyone is constantly looking for that next edge and looking to be coached and to coach, then it can just be like, it's just a really exciting thing to be a part of.
No, absolutely. I think it embodies the idea of what makes a successful sports team. Talking about sports teams specifically here, what he's done with British cycling is incredible. But it's funny because I remember we've spoken about this guy a lot, and a lot of the ideas I've tried to bring to wherever I've gone is about the every 1%. Working with Lars Robel now here at Falcons as the director of performance, he's so many different ideas and ways of working to help an individual grow in their mentality and behavior, and we're just both on the same page. Every 1% matters when it comes to elite sport, when it comes to the top end of winning a trophy. Is that appropriate to like the working world every day? Yeah, maybe not, but there's still different ways. It's completely off topic as well, but I remember a while back I was like looking at opportunities perhaps outside esports for a brief moment. I don't know why I let myself have that idea, but and actually one of the jobs that I interviewed for was to effectively be like a performance manager for a trading floor. And when I was speaking to them, and going like, why do you need this? Like, why do you, these are guys and girls in high pressure environments where every 1% does matter, because 1% in that business is $1 million, $2 million. Like every day, if everyone goes up 1%, that company is insanely profitable this year. And it was just very interesting seeing the similarities between the idea of taking every 1% and how it's applicable to the traditional business world in some aspects, not just the sports world as you and me know it. So, yeah, didn't take the job, obviously, but it was just very interesting to see a very different environment that is still ultimately competition, and how something like that would matter.
And how do you go about trying to get to an organization where everyone is willing to be coached, everyone is coaching, everyone's always looking out for that next edge, not just the players, because to be honest, even having 5 players and 2 coaches on that level is very rare, I would say. But beyond that, the wider organization, especially people who maybe feel like, okay, I work in a high performance industry, but I'm in operations, or I'm in a different area, and so maybe I shouldn't be being pushed as much. Like, how do you try and get to that really exciting organization?
It's kind of 2 parts. I mean, if you're at a startup point, it's way easier to build it from scratch, right? It's so critical that you have very clear company foundation and company goals and what you believe in, such that everyone who comes in is aware of this and believes in it. Some of us don't have the privilege in the sense that we're not a startup anymore. We can't do that, and so then it really is about building an environment and a cultural philosophy with people around you of what you believe in, and getting them to understand what the benefits to the company. So that's a lot harder because you're effectively working with people who already have their minds designed or made up in a certain way, and you're kind of having to take a step back, and that's where company away days are important and things like this to kind of build this with them, get them to believe. But you also need to show them the results and bring them along for journey. Too many companies I see go, we believe in this, and everyone goes, wait, and then 1 month everyone's like, right, recite what we said, and I can't remember what we even agreed to. I'm just working. And it's because so much emphasis is given on the announcement, design, and creation, and no emphasis is given on the execution and the results gain from the execution, which is how you get your dopamine hit and get someone to believe in something. So I think that part is very, very critical. Is you don't just start the journey, but you need to have the steps along the way to show and complete the journey to get people to believe. And another big thing for me is your hiring. Your hiring processes have got to be top tier. It's something I think, admitting esports, we kind of let slip a little bit because we rely on people we know or networks or someone who's got experience, etc. And actually, you're doing this with the players. Why are you not doing the staff? Which is hiring someone who believes in your ideologies, believes in your systems, believes in your culture, and you're bringing someone who is effectively pre-made and pre-built towards your ideas. And if everyone's on the same page, you're all just moving forward together and growing and learning and adapting. And then if there's a failure, that's because your idea in the first place sucked. But which hopefully you'll learn from. But I think that's a big part as well as missing. You need to give so much emphasis into your hiring department, around your HR department, to get the right people, because I find it kind of ironic that we'll do that for players, we'll do that for coaches, but then we won't do it for staff. So that's a big part of me. Everyone I hire, I really try to very much understand their mindset, philosophies, and why they're trying to join my organization, what they're gaining from it, so that I know they understand what we're trying to create here.
I'd love to get into the hiring process and maybe some tips you have around that. But before I do, you talk about, getting our, if it's something like the culture code, it's about getting your story, or, and as Lars talks about a lot, finding the dream. Something I actually didn't ask him, but did he do that with you as a staff as well as an organization? Because in his book, he talked about doing it with Kellogg's and stuff like that. So is that something that you guys have done as a kind of, I don't know what you even call it, like the unit that's above all the teams? Because all the teams do it separately.
It's funny, yeah, because so Lars is actually at the moment, for want of a better phrase, he's almost training Massad, our CEO, in this ideology and these behaviours. It's not that he needs training as such, but Lars has this idea of performance philosophy that goes from the top of the company to the bottom, which is, what I agree with. Why I wanted him is that idea that we can all be on the same page, and every person in the company provides towards the performance of the teams, no matter whether you're in merch or ops or whatever it may be. So a lot of what Lars is doing right now, he spent a long time sort of building what we're calling the Falcons DNA. What is our performance philosophy? What do we believe in when a player joins us? What are we giving them as our sort of code of conduct, our morals, our beliefs, whatever it may be? And now that's done, we're actually going up to the top and taking Massad through it and the people around him and going, this is what we're doing, this is what this is what we believe in. Now we're in a bit of almost a privileged position because Massad's still a player. He's he still competes in the AFC, former world champion. He's competing this weekend in a DreamHack tournament. So we are a little bit spoiled in that sense because he gets sheer direct benefit immediately from what Lars Work's doing towards his playing. But obviously it's about the company as a whole from top bottom. So yeah, it's really nice to see Lars be doing that. We're still in the early stage, I'd say. Like, it's very much focused at Massad at the moment, but over time that'll trickle down. But to be honest, as Lars has joined us and we're doing a lot of expansion at the moment, we're trying to make sure the people coming in are in his system as well. And there's a lot of that happening as we speak.
I love that. I think it's something that's really missed in almost everywhere in esports. There are some examples, like you could say KC or Mad Lions or something, this idea that actually you should try to build some pride in the jersey, that kind of idea where, like, okay, you want to also, as part of the way you encourage the best players, is not just we're going to pay you the most money or even we're going to win, but it's like part of the whole system that can actually be really exciting. And I think people really, I don't know if they undervalue it or it's just so early on. I mean, the All Blacks talk about this idea of Waka Papa, the history of the club. And, whenever you join, you get literally a book of everything that's happened, everything that's come before. And the idea is you should be thinking about, how do I leave the jersey in a better place to how I found it? And reading stuff like that, I'm like, I just cannot imagine that in esports. At least
no, it's I remember it's taking step back when I was at Guild. Like, it was something I really tried to push. Was like, it kind of goes back to the 1% idea, but ultimately everyone's having an effect on the team, no matter what you're doing. And I remember when we, won our first few trophies, the big point we made in the performance team is like everybody here had an effect on that. We won not because of me or the coach. We won because everyone believed in what we were trying to create and gave it to it. And it's a huge part of why I love Falcons so much. I almost get drawn into the passion sometimes because the staff, all on the MENA side, are so insanely passionate and prideful of what they're doing with Falcons, no matter what it is they're doing. and it's so infectious. It's so infectious. Like when I go there, during the World Cup, I'll be there again. I just know it's like every day I'm walking, I'm like bouncing of like how a Falcon's going to win today. It's amazing how much it spreads when you have those people who, okay, maybe need directional or coaching or mentorship, but ultimately they believe in the jersey, they believe in the sports team, etc. Because I think it's easy to forget we're all working to win some video games, right? We're all doing this because this job is fun, right? It doesn't matter where it is. If we just wanted money, we wouldn't be doing esports, unless you're a player. We'd be doing some other industry, right? Merch, ops, performance, whatever it is. We're doing this because gaming is fun and it's enjoyable and it's competitive. And I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that in an esports org when everything's growing so fast.
Yeah, absolutely love that. I think it's so crucial. And one of the things, people are getting a little bit more comfortable doing a lot of this stuff around actively building a culture. Something that like Romain talks about a lot. You've got Lars doing it with you guys, really like taking active steps rather than just letting it happen. But one thing that I don't see enough is if you've got an embedded content person or you've got a social media manager who comes in a lot, they are part of the culture too. If it's someone who's truly embedded, which is different conversation, but I believe is the way forward, they're just as equal a part of the culture. They might not be as equal part of the performance. They might not be as equal part of the outcome, but they're a tenth of the culture. If there's 10 people, it doesn't matter what job they have. So they really do need to buy into it.
It really is possible that if you name every job in a sports or in esports organization, that it is actually, if you sit down and think about it, there's a very easy way to explain the path of what they do leads to benefit for the performance of the team. So, for example, a content person, you could easily say the path is they're producing content. It makes the team more attractive. It makes the players want to be more loyal to the brand because you're growing their brands. And it makes it more attractive to future players to come in. So we suddenly get access to players who perhaps we didn't in the future, who are better players because of the content you are doing. That's a very simple one. But you can really define a path for every single member of a company towards how are you benefiting our team winning.
Yeah, and even if you take that content example, there'll be a lot of teams where building that market, building that fan base is going to take a long time, so it's maybe not something you see instantly. But even from a more simple point of view, as a coach, I know when I say we're doing content this morning or when I say we're doing half our off day is going to be content, the response is normally like, oh. So if the content person can make it exciting, can make it fun, then that's a huge benefit to me, because suddenly it's like, great, we get to go and do some content, and that's just completely different. So you're instantly, even that week, the direct performance, or I guess, of course it was incredibly lucky, but having Boaster do the vlogs for Excel, I remember when he came back to London, people were messaging me like, can we have Boaster back, just because he makes everyone feel better. So it's like you can have this massive input, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I think Alex Ferguson said at one point he wanted it to get to the point where if you ask the janitor what they're doing, he says, I'm winning the treble.
That for Hughes is a huge thing. That's so funny you raise it, because I've also followed that same philosophy of Ferguson of whenever I've gone into a new team or something like that, I always describe, I want the CEO and the cleaner to know what our goals are, trophy-wise, performance-wise, strategy-wise, right? What is our goals for whatever teams we're in? And everyone should be able to recite it because everyone contributes to it. So, it's nice to hear that, because that is the right way to do it. And that's what makes it fun as well. It makes it fun and enjoyable, and that's what we're here for.
So they often say with culture, one person pulling in the wrong direction can ruin it for however many people the other way. You mentioned the hiring process before. How do you go about, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, but trying to get beneath what someone is going to say in an interview?
Yeah.
Because I would expect you start talking like this, you start dropping these fantastic organizations, fantastic names, talking about like Man United or something. No one's going to say, no, I don't buy that. I'd rather join an organization where I don't care.
Exactly, yeah.
So how do you work out like if they're really going to buy in or they're just saying they're going to buy in?
Yeah, it's something I've just learned to spot over the years. So I mean, I'll run through how I help it, but you can spot now, and I think anyone who's been doing it for a few years can, of like who is being genuine versus who is giving you the interview answers, right? Who's giving you the answers you want to hear, they think you want to hear rather themselves. So trying to break that down is important, because it doesn't mean that individual's bad. It doesn't mean that individual's not good for you. It's just like that individual either has had bad history of interview technique because this has worked, in the past, or they're just nervous or whatever it may be. So it's so important to break down. The interviews, I think most people know of me, the interviews I do are unbelievably casual, right? Like if you turn up in a suit, I'll be angry. It's like super casual. The first thing I say is this isn't an interview, this is a chat. I just want to get to know you. I want you to get to know me. I try to make sure that I answer or provide information, to questions they have as much as they ask me. So it's almost 50-50. It's never, I've got 10 questions, you get one. It's very 50-50. And through just making it extremely casual, I'll start off, tell me about you as a person. Like, what hobbies do you have? Like, oh, you have a dog. Yeah, I have a dog too. Like, whatever it may be, you just break that initial barrier down. And then I start to open up into, I guess, what you call the more, the tougher questions around your philosophies, your beliefs, your mindset, etc. But because that barrier is broken down, they feel more willing to open up to me, and they drop the barrier, let's say, to what a traditional interview might be. No, it doesn't always work. Not everyone does it, and sometimes I have to, have a chat per second time, and be like, hey, let's try and approach it differently. Maybe I'll get you to talk to someone else in the company, or maybe we'll come to it in person. It doesn't always work, but having it so casual and just me talk about my day, you talk about your day, what should you enjoy, what do I enjoy, and just creating that sort of personal link initially then allows you to get a much more trusting answer. And then it really, really will go deep, and it really will go into talk to me about your mindset or your performance philosophy, how you approach a job. And we can be there for 45 minutes onwards, just talking about one, two, three things. And I'm always giving my opinions and my thoughts too, to just see if they link up, if they react to it. Right, you think that, I think this. What do you, do you agree, disagree? And they're willing to be more honest. So I just try to keep it as casual as possible, and that's led to the best opportunities, and you get the real versions of people, which is what you need to understand who is coming into your company.
Yeah, I think I can't remember exactly the percentage, but someone was telling me at one point, I think it's a majority of decisions around hiring are made in the small talk, but in a normal
Yeah,
interview, the small
please,
talk's
you
only
get
a
a
couple of
feel.
minutes. So like
Everyone goes, you
extend.
get feeling, you get gut instinct. I'm like, no, stop that. That means nothing, right? The reason you got that feeling is you like the person because they were a good chat and they were funny and they were this and they were. So explain to me what is gut instinct yourself. Explain to me what that feeling is, and suddenly people can break it down a bit more. But I always argue, you think of the traditional interview setup, one or two, maybe three people kind of sat on this side of the screen. I have 10 questions for you. End of interview. Do you have any questions? You're forced to ask one to not, feel like you didn't do any thinking. And like when you come into the business, that is not how you're going to work with us, and we're not going to work. You're not going to sit down at the beginning of the day and go, right, here's 10 tasks for you. Do you have one task for us? Suits and mindsets of like we're just your boss, not working together. It's not how it works in a real business. So why should the interview be like that? And to be honest, I think it's just a bit of an easy cop out to be like, here's the 10 questions we're asking everyone. We're just going to put a mark on each. And look, if you're hiring 1,000 people because you're a national, international business or something, fine, right? Like you might not have that ability. But us as startups in esports, or even mid-size in esports, we have the ability to personalize each and every interview, and we should, because that's how we get the best talent.
Yeah, and I think no matter the job, people always think, okay, this is true for other jobs, but not mine. But no matter the job, I always would think the right person is better than the right skill set, already coming in
Yeah,
with pre-existing experience or 10 years of experience in that specific field, or just someone who is competent and aligns with your philosophy.
that is my belief that, okay, you need a baseline, because I'm going to need to rely on you, especially in a startup. Startups are very, you need to be very self-aware and very self-driven to go and do things without being asked, because that's a requirement for us. But at the same time, I've always found that experience is lovely, right? It's nice because it skips that difficult first stage, the kind of settling in, the understanding how the business works, that self-driven part, as I said, going out and doing things I've thrown back. I know what I'm going to do because I've done it 10 times before. That's lovely, and that makes life very easy for someone settling in. And again, that's a bit of a cop-out, right? Because if I'm having to hire someone where basically I need the ease of them coming in and just doing stuff without me even speaking to them and that kind of thing, I'm already like a little bit too far gone with my role, because now there's no way I can be a mentor, there's no way I can be a coach, there's no way that person can grow to me, and they will start to do things of their own belief system, philosophy system, whatever it may be, which might not fully align with mine, and I wouldn't even know because I haven't got time to talk to them. So if you've gone that far, you're already kind of too far gone, and you need to take a step back. And ultimately, every hire shouldn't be about ease of settling in. It should be about, do they align with you? Do they believe in what you believe in? And are they going to match up so that, after the 6-month difficult period, 1.5 years, 2 years, 3 years, however long they may be there, they're perfect for you because they're growing and they're learning and they're doing under your system of belief, and you have a second version, of this person, that person you need, that just follows and understands everything that's being done here. And it just means you have to go through the difficult phase of helping them settle in, helping them grow, getting them to learn the basics as basically needed, etc. You have to go through that. It's worth it every single time. If you don't, it's just the classic, like, you're using a cheat code to skip the first 6 months of work, and 4 or 5 years from now, you're going to have a bunch of people in the company who don't follow the same system, and you're going to be in trouble. So don't take the short-term win.
You mentioned there the 6 months of difficulty. Is it something you do having a trial period? Because actually something that I've been thinking about for coaching staff as well, which is maybe a little bit less traditional. I mean, in normal jobs, we're very familiar with the idea of having a trial period where you're kind of getting used to things. You're seeing if it really is a good fit, because interviews can only be so good. And actually, I was talking to a team. I won't say what team. I think it's probably better. I was talking to a team that was in a very new place for me. And I was saying, like, okay, normally, and I'm, I guess, known for talking about longer term projects, talking about multi-years and stuff like that. But really, actually, I've been thinking more recently, that's not what I want straight away. Let's do a split together. And then if it works, then we can do 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Then you can do a longer thing. But coming straight in, there's so many different variables, and it doesn't matter how good your interview process is, it's never going to be as good as seeing someone work for a full split. So is this something you do just for like organizational stuff? Is it something you experiment with in performance as well, or anything like that?
So I try not to do that, funny enough. I'm a little bit the opposite in the belief there. I have done it in the past, and the times I've done it in the past is where I'm bringing someone in who I do believe follows the same ideologies, belief system, etc., of our culture and what we want to create, but they really have like zero baseline experience, and so I don't actually know day to day truly how they work, how they approach operations, processes, whatever it may be. So in that sense, I would do a trial because I kind of want to see, can you just learn and grow in the basics of your job? Forget the high level philosophy, like, can you learn the basics? And that might be subject to trial. That's the rare case where I use it. So that's organizational staff. That's not players or coaches. I try not to do trial systems because kind of two parts. A, I like to think that our hiring system is good enough to recognize those who will fit in regardless. But you're right, like, there are variables, things don't always work. But secondarily, I found that when you do a trial period, you get a different version of the person that you are working with. You get someone who is putting excessive levels of effort, not a good level, like excessive levels of effort that are not sustainable. You get someone who is just going beyond at all times, which then feels like the norm, and that's, again, not a good precedent to set. You were in some cases, you end up with an employee who basically, after the trial ends and you keep them completely 180 to a level where my expectation of them is severely damaged, because I'm like, you used to be like that, how are you now like that? And it's because it's just unsustainable what they're doing. The flip side is they continue in the same manner and they completely burn out and quit after a year. So I try to avoid it because I've not seen the benefits of a trial system being successful. And effectively, sometimes you hire someone, and there's been a few times, as anyone, where I've gone, this isn't working. I have made a hiring mistake here. You know this is not for you. We need to have a chat. And in the few cases it's happened 3 or 4 times, like, the individual has almost always just mutually agreed to leave because it's just very obvious it's not working. So that's my opinion. I can see why some people do it. I think for coaches and players, for coaches mainly, it's a little bit different because it's such high extreme performance sport that you're talking about someone who needs to come at 95% and take them to 100%. It's not a basic working job. So that's where there are so many nuances and tiny variables of how that coach fits in with the team, for example. Not just, it doesn't, they believe in your philosophy system, but that doesn't mean they get on with the players. That doesn't mean they socially connect with players. That doesn't mean they have the nuances of understanding when to be aggressive versus passive, whatever it may be. So in that sense, I think again a trial might be much more applicable. But again, it's still the same issue. You get a version of a coach who's not 100% what you're actually going to get at the end of the trial, because they are very much working with the short-term mindset of I need to achieve this to keep the job. And it's difficult. There are more nuances to like someone of a high elite performance level. Financials comes into it at that point as well. You're signing someone who's on 20, 30, 40k a month. If you don't do a trial period, you can't let them go easily because they're on a fixed contract or something like this. That becomes a nuance as well. So yeah, it's more difficult conversation for high level elite sport.
And how do you try and differentiate? You mentioned, a few times where you've had to say, okay, I made a hiring mistake. Firstly, love that as a mindset rather than you're not right. It's
It
like,
happens.
I think that's such a good thing. Different tangent, but people talking to me about, was it a mistake to let this coach go after 2 months or not? And I'm saying, look, there is always a mistake if a situation happens like that. Either it's a mistake to let them go now, or it was a mistake to hire them in the first place. There's no way you can get out of this without any kind of mistake. But anyway, the question that I had on that, how do you identify, especially when you're like Falcons, you're spread all over Europe, you mostly working with people remotely. How do you identify when it's someone is struggling and kind of needs support, or when someone is kind of not putting the effort in, or they've slightly changed their mindset, or it's not working? How do you know when they need help, and how do you know when they need discipline? I guess the most extreme form of discipline in this case being to find someone new.
So on the help side, I've often noticed that someone who needs more help to grow in what they're doing, they will compensate for correct work with sheer hard work and hours, which many people out there would love that idea for their company. I think is actually just so wrong. You burn out your staff and they don't want to work for you long term, and it's not good. And so it's very easy to notice when someone is putting in hard work. You can see from the sheer hours they're putting in, yet the work is not matching what you expect. And for you to then go, oh, the solution is to work harder. So, well, no, they're clearly working in the wrong way, because if my expectation is they should be able to achieve this in a 40-hour working week, for example, and they're doing 50, 55, and it's not happening, then there's a mismatch here, right? There's a mismatch in that they are willing to do it, but they clearly don't fully understand it, or they don't quite get it, or they're approaching it the wrong way. It's the idea of work smart, not just work harder. Work smart, not work harder. So it's actually very visible to see that. And I like to sit down with the individual, right? Take me through how you're working, take me through what you're working, what are your individual goals we've set, how is that happening? I would hope at this point you as an individual are able to recognize, again, where someone has that sort of talent for growth, like they're able to grow and learn. And then if anything, it's just an issue on me that I'm not giving that person a chance to actually grow and develop, because I'm not helping them, directing them, mentoring, etc. So yeah, if someone's on their phone non-stop, they're responding to every message, they're producing work at all hours of the day, yet it's not quite where you want it to be, that means I'm doing something wrong. On the more, say, discipline, not working hard enough, not putting the work in, etc., I have seen that a couple times. I remember one example from my time at Excel, etc. It happens, right? And sometimes and it's not always down to, it's not because the individual's lazy. Most time it's usually because the individual is a mixture of overwhelmed, or lacks the basic understanding of the job, or just doesn't have the skills this job, and it's just a bad hire. Basically, at the end of the day, it's just a bad hire. It's not malicious from the individual, it's just a bad hire. In those cases, I've rarely found a solution other than letting that person go. Because you're not talking about someone who can grow and develop and learn. So you're talking about someone who can't. And that is why they're not putting the hours in, because they're just straight up going, I don't know what to do, and I can't figure it out, and I can't put the work in to figure it out. So in those rare cases, you often need to let the individual go and help them find another opportunity that fits what they need.
I love that first part where you're talking about, if there's someone who's struggling, who's having to put in a huge amount of hours to do stuff, your first step is to come and say, show me how you're doing, like, how are you doing things, all that kind of thing. And it reminds me of this quote that a manager that my dad knew and thought very highly of. He used to say, when someone's struggling, it's like, right, I'm going to give them a good listening to.
Yeah,
Which is like the
I like
opposite
that.
of what
I'm gonna
we.
give him a good listening to.
Yeah, but it's so crucial. Like that's the time where the maybe traditional management model would be that's the time to come in and say, oh, your work's not up to standard and this kind of thing. Whereas
Yeah.
really that's the moment where you need to be listening the most.
Well, that's for sort of brief time in let's say the traditional working world, I guess we you and me would call it. That those are like these old school systems in place of like someone's working hard, but it's not scratch. It's like you come in and you have a go at the employee, or you come in and you tell them like what they're doing is bad, but you don't give any new direction, you don't give any new growth, any new help, and you certainly don't hear them out. And it makes no sense. I just find it baffling. And yet, funny enough, the companies that are extremely successful out there, the only one I've had the chance to work to, I think Ernst & Young, which is a huge accountancy firm, they do this, right? As in they do the right thing. Like if I saw firsthand, just in the few months I was there, I saw firsthand when certain individuals were struggling or certain individuals couldn't achieve what they're doing, there was opportunities and offer for help and for support and for growth at all aspects. There really wasn't this sort of like boss to employee relationship. It was like everyone was genuinely trying to work together. And this is in a massive corporation, huge, thousands of people. And you're like, yeah, this is why you're a top four. Like you can just sit back and go, this is why the business is successful. And it doesn't feel, when you see it, it almost baffles you of like, oh, it doesn't feel hard. Like I see why you get the best talent now. I see why people want to work for you. I see why you as a business, and it's just this kind of system and ideology. The problem is if they were in the wrong mindset, if they approach it wrongly, they're so far gone at this point because you are thousands upon thousands of employees. To put a shift in the company with a new CEO is it's just years of work, and that's the case for a lot of large companies out there who haven't perhaps reached the heights of, let's say, Google or Apple, something like that, but they're still very big. But that's why they can't take that final leap. Is I think the whole cultural mindset might just be a bit off. But yeah, I've gone on a complete tangent there, but it does come down to like how you relate to your employee and just willing to hear them out. I think everyone forgets we're just humans at the end of the day trying to earn money and do a job. Yes, we enjoy our jobs, but it's not much more. Nothing's ever malicious, truly malicious. Nothing's ever truly. No one's ever trying to be a bad employee, right? No one's ever truly trying to be a bad employee. But for some reason, we forget that.
Yeah, I like the mindset of never attribute to malice what can easily be attributed to incompetence.
Yeah, yeah. You couldn't. That sums up best. 100%.
This is maybe an impossible question, but I also really love the thing you were saying at the beginning of this answer, I guess I should say, of it's not okay, this person's doing a huge amount of hours. That's not the thing. If they're not achieving the things in the right way, then maybe can be a bit more a bit more precise with the way that they spend their time. There's a Tim Ferriss quote which I love, which is busyness is just another form of laziness. It's lazy
Yeah.
thinking and indiscriminate action. But my question is, let's say they've gone the other way and you give them a bunch of stuff to do and you think it's going to take 40 hours or whatever, and it takes substantially less, but the output is good. Is that because that's something I think most people, at least most managers, are very uncomfortable with, the idea that someone isn't working 9 to 5 or however you do it?
I detest that idea personally. I mean, look, ironically, I'm in esports where I think hours, ironically, don't really exist, and people would prefer a 9 to 5 because it's actually less hours than what we sometimes do. But the idea of face time, face value, like put your face in there, make sure you show. I just hate it because nobody's winning out of that other than egos, right? If I'm sitting there, whether it's in an office or online, I'm like, I'm still working. You should be working next to me. They've got nothing to do. They're just sitting there. I'm like, I'm spoiling that individual's day. B, I'm wearing them out and making them more tired for good work tomorrow. Like, why? What am I gaining from that? And so if I set a bunch of work and that person's improved, that's growing, and they're completing in time, congratulations, you're getting 3 hours extra today to play video games or chill. Like that's it. Now you have to be careful because there's a difference between putting in really good work, reducing hours, and rushing, right? Like you still have to find that balance. But ultimately, that's a great position to be in. And if it's a consistent thing, then of course we'll start to talk about, right, what other things can we add into your workload to provide to help you grow us. And that's not the reward is you complete work, you get more work. That is genuine about, perhaps we can do a thing now that you want to look at or you want to do, or perhaps it's a piece of work that will help you grow into a higher role in the future. Like, what can we do to expand your role? And that should always be an exciting thing. But there are a couple nuances here, because I've seen this firsthand as well. Is number one, when you have, and again, you need, this depends on your hiring stuff. Let's say you've hired 10 great employees and 10 very average employees. You always find that the 10 average employees will complete their work over a longer period, whether they're incompetent or whether it's the laziness aspect, so whatever it may be. They want to do their hours and get it done. And then you have the 10 great employees who produce the same work in half the time. It is very, very easy to then go to those good employees and go, brilliant, here's double the work because you've completed it. And that is when you then cause huge amounts of like issues in your company where, I forget the word, sorry, but effectively those good people start to become angry and upset because they're having to create double the work for the same hours. They're not getting rewarded in terms of, say, paid more or chance of stepping up or whatever it may be. And a lot of resentment. That's what you get, resentment towards the company. So you can't afford to do that. So that's why, again, going back to hiring, you need everyone to be on the same page or be working strong and hard. And sure, if someone is slightly slower than someone else, and there's no resentment, there's no worries issue there, because you still know you're all going towards the same goal. So that's a big nuance I've learned of, like, hardworking people are like punished with more work. But so you, as whoever's in charge, you must keep an eye on that. That's so critical, or else I've seen too many companies where that, in esports, where that happens. There's just resentment from your best performers resent you as a company.
Yeah, and I love the idea of giving them space to do something that they want, or learn a new skill, or you can go to an online course in your extra time, or something like that, where there's so many ways that you can kind of do a bit of both. I think, to be honest, and speaking as someone who did who was a manager before, and I think I didn't take it anywhere near seriously enough in terms of all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of the people who want you to work 9 to 5 or something like that, it can often come from a bit of laziness, really. Because if I don't know exactly how much work I'm giving you and how long it should take, then the easy way out is to just say, well, you have to be in from 9 to 5. And if you have no work and you're sitting there just building up that resentment or doing nothing, not being productive, at least in my head, it's like, well, they're working because that's here.
It makes you feel good as the boss, because everyone's saying, like, look at what's going on in here, and it's an ego thing. I've also always said that, imagine, again, you'd have a bunch of employees. If you're making them work 9 to 5 as well, you're getting 80% out of all of them, right? Because they're coming and they're doing their hours, they're completing the work in the time, because let's say you are setting the work correctly, they've completed work in time. Maybe they finished early, maybe finished late. So, if the person's finished early, you're only getting 78% out of them. The person finished late, they'll have to stay a few extra hours anyway, so it's kind of not by the by. Whereas if you're going in and individualizing everyone, you're getting 100% out of everyone. But if you don't put in the work, you're going to get 50% out of everyone. So it's like risk and reward. While, like, if you're willing to put a lot more work in of time management, the work you're setting employees, clear job, roles, what's expected of them, and make sure the work you're giving them is achievable and functional as well, with rewards as a result, you're going to have the most amazing, happy employees who are putting in so much more work than, say, 9 to 5. But it's not easy to do. That takes up a lot of effort and a lot of time to get right. And if you don't get it right, you're now getting employees who aren't working 9 to 5 are below what you'd get if you just make them sit there and do the standard stuff you need. So that's it. That's the reward. But the reward is you get employees who are just so much happier and enjoyable and believe this. And again, in a sports company, that's critical. That again, it all helps towards performance.
Yeah, and you're right. It just takes more time of the manager, and the more employees you have, the more % of your time is managing them and coaching them, like you mentioned in your first answer. So you have to embrace that, and you can't be doing the things that you were previously doing. That's
it. You said it with laziness, some words that's an appropriate word, some ways it's not. But yeah, like me as the manager, I have to put in more work to get that to occur. And if I'm feeling lazy, well, just 9 to 5, go do it. So yeah, it's very applicable.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to get clearer on as coaches as well, because especially as these staff teams keep growing in size more and more, we see, okay, the person who's the best head coach in a lower ERL where it's just themselves, they're the one who get promoted to be a head coach, and now suddenly they're managing one other person. And then they get promoted to the LEC, and suddenly now there's like 5 people. It's like now less and less of your job is about coaching the game, and more of it becomes about organizing the staff structure and that kind of thing. And I think that's something that we've really just completely missed. And we say, okay, you were the best head coach when you're working by yourself, therefore you'll be the head coach. Now we've got a team of 6 people. And suddenly in reality, 50% or less of their time should be now spent on the game. And maybe they're the person who's perfect to be in the game.
That's it. It's we have a I don't want to say it's an arbitrary working system. This is, I'm talking again just like sort of more nationally rather than just esports, of you're promoted because you're good at the work item you do, and the result of your promotion is you become a manager, right? So you go from you are good at this coding this software to now you're managing 5 people at coding that software. And I'm just sitting there going, that makes no sense, right? Because what skills of you being good at that specific job now relate to running individuals to the same thing? The skills are vastly different. And of course, some people are great at it, and plenty aren't. And it goes both ways. But we just have to arbitrate. Oh, promotion equals you're in charge of more people, and because you're in charge of more people, congrats, you know what you're doing, and that's all. Like it actually is so backwards. And what you end up doing is you do a skill drain in your own company, where your people who are good at the nitty gritty job are not doing that, and in return, they're crap managers who are now not able to teach, coach, mentor, set goals, whatever it may be, for the individuals to be good at the nitty gritty. So it's funny, like it's so appropriate in a sports team of what you've just said around a head coach. Like not everyone is good at people management, right? It's a skill you have to learn, you have to give time to. If you're in a sports environment, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to have 5 years to learn something, right? You might not get that. So sorry, you can't be a people manager for 5 years. We don't have time. That's the stress we're put under. So identifying who's good at what is so critical, and not just promoting for the sake of it, and not just putting someone in for the sake of it just because they've done a good job here. But that's our arbitrary working system. That's a huge hard thing to break, because you're also in a situation where one employee's working damn hard, they're doing well, congrats, you're now manager, even though you're going to be garbage at it, but their reward is they get paid more, and it's what they've been expecting for the last 10 years. How do you break that culture of, right, we're actually going to promote this guy who's nowhere near you, and it's not a reflection of you, but it's like immediately you're going to be like, oh, it is a reflection of me, I've not been doing so. Such cultural boundaries of work we have to break down to fix that. And I could talk about this all day, and this is something that is years and years and years away of companies running successfully, and arguably isn't too appropriate to sports and esports. But again, in high performance, things like this matter, right? Is getting the most out of your employees in their exact roles.
I mean, I can also talk about this for ages. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think they call it the Peter principle. You're promoted to your lowest level of incompetence. You get promoted
like
and promoted and promoted until you can't do that role, and
until
then
you
don't
can't
get
do that
promoted
job,
anymore.
and then you're stuck.
And they did a study, and they found that if you promote people entirely at random, it's just as effective.
Just
because it, like you said, you don't. If it's a sales team, you don't also lose your best salesperson.
yeah.
So I am, you said it's impossible to fix, but I'm still going to ask you anyway. How do you go about, on a smaller scale, because it's technically still a startup? We're not talking about redesigning the entire system of capitalism, but just at the Falcons level. How do you go about doing that? Because even just the thing of all the words we use and all the pictures we use with this structure and hierarchy and going up the ladder, and it's so ingrained, this idea. So how do you try and combat that, where you can say, okay, this person is the best performing person, and so they're going to get the extra money, but this person's the best manager, so they're going to be in the exact same, somehow in the same situation, but also, it's this weird dynamic. So is there anything you found that's been helpful for that?
It does go back to hiring and your hiring process again for me. And again, being in a startup, you have like a more privileged position, because when I come into, say, a new esports org, or most esports orgs are either still a startup or not quite mid-size yet. You have the room, and you tend to have younger employees who haven't been in the role long. You have the room to bring in outside third-party managers, general managers, whatever level it is, right, who will believe in your culture. You have to still make sure they're the right hire, but ultimately do have the experience of being good at that role, right? And you can do that because there's not an expectation yet that internally there should have been promotions. Internally, people should be earning more money now. Internally, you're right, because you're, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, right? So that is a very privileged position to be in. But at some point that will switch, and that will not be the case anymore. And you're either going to lose your employees or you're going to have to promote them or something in between, right? So it goes back to your hiring principles. When I look to hire, let's say, a team manager, right, what's kind of considered the first rung of esports outside, as a in the performance system. Yes, I need to interview you based on how you're going to be at that team manager role. But I also already in that interview try to get a real sense of your personality and your mindset behavior through that kind of casual talk I spoke about, to understand what is your capabilities long term, how high can you go. And it's really hard to say this over like 3 times 1 hour interviews to figure this out. But when you're doing that process for an individual, you need to think about the long term. So you need to answer the question of where they're going to be good now for the next 2 years, but are they going to be the kind of person that you think they could grow into a general manager, a director, etc.? Are they someone who's going to learn in philosophies? Are they someone who's going to learn how to people manage? Are they going to do things? And it's just a particular kind of mindset of people. I have always sort of focused more towards those of a very operational mindset, very process mindset, learning by, putting things in place effectively, writing down systems, writing down processes, using project management software tools and putting it out there, and learning by doing that way, right? Through, I guess you could call it almost writing a software of how to do performance and learning that. And that's because I naturally, that is how I think. I'm from the engineering background, so that's what I'm going to gravitate towards, because I know those are the kind of people I can teach. I know those are the kind of people I can grow. Someone who comes in who, let's say, have a much more creative mindset could be insanely good at their job, right? But because they're in that more creative mindset, they approach things in a very different way. I can't grow them, I can't improve them, and I can't mentor them because I do not have that capability. And therefore, I cannot say if they will be useful at a higher level, high level after that. Perhaps they could be the best damn director of performance in the world. I wouldn't be able to tell that. So you need to work with what you know as you grow every day, as I, as an individual, grow every day, so that when I come to my hiring process, I can recognize individuals that are going to be good now, good later, and ultimately could take my position 3, 4 to 10 years down the line. You have to do it at day one with the hiring.
Okay. So we've spoken about, spending time to make sure the people who are working under you have the right amount of work, they have the support that they need. We've spoken about hiring. I don't know if this is a possible question to ask, but what is your kind of day to day like? What do you do, or week to week? What's an average day for you in your position? How much of each of these things are you doing, or is it? I guess, of course, it's very. Certain periods will be very hiring, certain periods will be a bit less, but just roughly.
Yeah, I mean, the quick background on the job to give perspective. So director of esports and operations, I'm responsible for the operations of our global division, so everything outside the Middle East, very primarily focused on our esports teams, logistics, travel, finance, whatever it may be around that, right? Hiring, of course, all of that. And then the director of esports role with it then is around the management of the team. So we have a director of performance, someone who's very specifically focused on the culture, philosophy, behavior of the team, which is someone I believe in, mentioned Lars Robel. And so my work is much more around the project management of the teams, the understanding of the budgets of the teams. If there's a change that's need to be made, how, why, and the what. How do we execute that? It's very much around the running of the team, and therefore also a lot of my work goes into, okay, how do I actually track the output of these teams? I'm not talking the performance, right? I'm not talking necessarily like how they're growing in that video game, because that is people I have experts for, but just much more, how is the team performing as a whole? Are they trending upwards? How am I managing goals of the team manager, of the coach, of the director of performance? How am I managing their growth goals to ensure they're giving the best opportunity? So day to day, the operation side means I can wake up and just spend my entire day trying to sort out bills and making sure that, I don't know, some legal document has been reviewed. But then the next day it wakes up and we've got a bunch of hires to do. We need to expand into a new location, which means we need office, hiring, legal process where it may be. It really is a very varied role with the ops side. And so therefore, what I try and do every day is I try and give a chunk to quote unquote putting out the fires, completing the daily tasks that need completing that have popped up that day. But I also always try to give sort of 2 to 3 hours of going, how or what am I doing to think ahead? And that could be checking out my tracking system for goals of my different employees. It could be working on a new scorecard system, how I'm going to measure the output teams. It could be what presentation I'm putting together for the board to ensure that they know the strategy for the next year. Always trying to think about what long-term objectives can be worked on, because there's always something to do around them to ensure that everyone's still focused on the same goal. And that's kind of how I get my kick out the day, because it is not fun to sit there and pay bills all day, shock horror. But then I get a real kick out of being like, right, this Dota team I have, how am I making sure they're still winning in 3 years' time? And working on what I believe the correct process is around that.
Is that something that you look to actively schedule? Because I think, again, I'm trying to think of new ways to say I love that every time when you say something, because it's like something I think that's so important for people who get into these leadership roles, that you don't just get caught up in the busyness, and you do find time to actually be pushing stuff forward. So is that something that you look to kind of actively schedule, where you say, okay, these time blocks, this is my creative thinking, or however you want to call it, this is my actually pushing us forward time, and I make sure that I protect those?
I actually do. I probably could be better actually, but I at least 3 out of my 5 days a week, I do actually put in a block. Usually with the folks, I will have worked out what is specific I want to work on. So I will have a block in my calendar where I've just written a word because that's the item I'm working on that day. I use I use Asana all the time. My project management software I don't stop talking about, but I have that really laid out for myself of what long-term goals have I got and what dates do I want to set for each part of that. And I just always work backwards from that. So I like to sit down on a Monday, figure out my working week, figure out where are some very just clear 2-3 hour gaps. Usually on the Thursday or Friday, right? Because beginning of the week is very sort of meeting and process orientated, task orientated. Sorry. So usually Thursday, Friday. Where are some very clear gaps? I'm just going to put those out. Right. What do I need to work on this week? Okay. I need to work on this strategy document. I need to work on this goal document. And I put those in. So I actually did it yesterday for 2 hours. No one was able to contact me when I was working on a new strategy document I need to do. So I really try to make a point of it. But that's also because that's how I get the most fun out of my job. So like if I didn't do that, I might come to not enjoy what I do, which I never want to be the case. So yeah. But it's also, I think it's important, sorry to add, because I'm kind of trivializing it, but it's so important because in esports, and especially if you're on the ops side of the business, the esports side of the business, etc., you're not a coach or a player, it's so easy, especially in a startup, to just fall into pure task orientated mindset. And I've been in that mindset at previous orgs before. You are just ticking off all these tasks every day and you're getting a dopamine hit every day. And it's lovely and stuff is getting done. But nothing is improving and no systems or processes are being created to slow that task orientation down or to improve that task orientation down. And more importantly, if I left the business, who can come in and continue that process? Well, if it's all task orientated, there's nothing to train that new person, there's nothing to help that new person, and it'll damage the business, which kind of defeats the whole point of why I'd be here. So it is critical you set those up.
I think it's absolutely fantastic advice. I think it's the same for coaches as well. We so quickly fall into busy work, fall into doing stuff, and no one takes time to find a way to be proactive. It's one of the 7 habits of highly successful people is be proactive rather than reactive. And yet in esports, we spend 99% of our time just reacting to stuff that's happening. And it's because you do have to be, and I think you have to be quite precious with it. And you have to be quite, look, like you say, no one can contact me in this time. I'm not going to let myself be distracted by, oh, this person's got a problem, that person's got a problem. And I think it's such a good thing for people to keep in mind, and something that when we learn it, we often learn it too late, or we just don't learn it at all. And you can quite easily bounce around just being reactive to everything. And then next team, you're just reactive to everything. Next team, you're reactive to everything. And actually, one of the things that I found so life-changing about the last couple of years is having the time to actually spend a lot of time doing that, like maybe a little bit more than I'd like, but still spending a lot of time to actually think and plan of like, how am I going to push things forward? How am I going to be proactive? And just another small story on that same thing. There's a guy who works with CEOs and performers, guy Josh Waitskins, and he does this thing called day architecture with them, setting up their day. And he basically goes through this process over weeks or even months, working out when they're best, like when they perform the best in certain hours. Some people are going to be early morning, some people are going to be later on, all that kind of stuff. And rather, he says what they almost always do, he's working with CEOs, they're like, okay, I'm best from 11 till 12, so that's when I schedule my meetings. And he says, no, that's the time to be like, this is the time when nothing is scheduled, your most important hour of the day or couple of hours of the week. I think it's fantastic advice for anyone listening. We don't always have the freedom, of course, if you're in a more junior position to do that, but finding a time, if you've got any management or coaching responsibilities, finding a time to actually optimize them and be proactive around them, I think is so useful.
It's so critical, because it's so easy to become reactive and feel like you're doing a good job, and to many extents you are, but it's just going to get worse and worse. And the problem is when someone's very reactive, it's very easy for everyone around them to fall into the same mindset, and you kind of become a reactive company. It's a culture that so easily spreads because everyone's getting these dopamine hits of ticking off tasks and feeling good about it. And it's just a slow slide to your company failing. And unfortunately, I've seen it too many times in esports where like this is kind of behavior, especially as you grow, right? Especially as you expand and get bigger, and you don't match, say, in the staffing or whatever it may be, you don't keep up with in the growth. You become reactive, and then you cannot get out of that culture mindset. And it's one of the things that one of the greatest things I learned was under Marty at Splice. Like he was a huge mentor to me, and he was so pernickety and so extreme about this idea of like, when there are hours to focus on what comes next, you do that, you turn off everything and you commit to that. And it used to really annoy me, because I was the head of ops at Splice, and I needed stuff to be done, right? I needed these things being doing. This is my own main thing, is that, and he would be like, stop doing that, let's go sit down and plan what's coming for Splice the next year. And I'd be like, no, I need to sort out. He'd be like, don't care, it can probably wait. And it even reached a point we never actually installed it, but he was going to. And I haven't had the balls to do this in a company yet. But he's buying the little traffic lights you can put on a desk, which are red, yellow, and green. And when it's like green, talk to me. Yellow, I'm working, but we can still talk about things. Red, I'm in focus time. I am working on this. Do not come near me, And I it's always on Amazon, this product, and I've never seen anyone having bought it, but I've always been like so close. So yeah, no, it's a little bit side story, but like I'm very lucky to learn to Marty that was the case, and I think it's why I feel like I've grown so much the last few years is because of that ideology.
Yeah, I love it. I think that traffic light system is great, or finding a way to do it on Slack or Discord. There's
It was big on Slack. I remember again. It's not happened since, like, and I should push it more, but yeah, at Slack he was the I think you can set the status of your thing on Slack, and he was so critical about everyone having a status on Slack at all times to very clearly explain the situation you're in. And we had like 5 presets, and you're allowed 1 extra set for you. Like, that's how pernickety we were at Slice. And this is a company who had, compared to other esports orgs at the time, had a quarter of the staff, a quarter of the budget, not even a quarter of the budget, yet was competing in the LEC, yet was competing in major esports and doing well, getting third in the LECs with just such smaller set of resources. And it was stuff like this that was just so critical to make it work. But man, it was annoying. And it's funny, it makes me laugh because it was so annoying at the time. And I look back at it and being like, you knew what you were doing. Fair play. Like, and I'm glad God's got to learn under you. And that's the idea of like, you can fall back into being reactive. It feels annoying, but you have to.
Something I do with the coaches that I work with, but I think it's useful for anyone, is it's just a fairly usual kind of time management audit sort of idea, where if you plot, importance versus urgency, and you say have important, not important, urgent, not urgent, and you try and put what you're doing in different areas, we find that almost always we're on the urgent side, if you're being generous with yourself, you're doing urgent and important tasks. If you're being realistic with yourself, you're often doing urgent and unimportant tasks. And the idea is that actually the people who really change things and really push the needle, you need to spend as much time as possible in important but not urgent. So no one is telling you you have to switch off to work out how the Dota team is going to still be performing in 4 years. But you have to find the time to make it yourself. And instead, we're just being led around by this kind of fake urgency. And it happens with coaches so much now. Now there's, more than 24 hours a day of professional League of Legends to watch, for example, or the same in any other game. There's so much content that you can be watching that it feels like sometimes you have to stay up to date with it. And I need to have seen who's winning the Chinese league and who's winning the LCK and all this kind of thing. And it's like you get distracted by urgency almost, or led around by urgency, maybe is a fairer way to say it. So anyone being able to find the time to do that, I think is so crucial. Is it something that you encourage? You mentioned the whole organization doing it. Is it something you encourage further down the line, as it were?
It's funny now you say it out loud. I think I could be a lot better at it, because I'm so good. I believe that I'm really good at it with myself, and a lot of times I'm talking to my general manager Jordan and the team manager such, and going like, I'm working on this item, this, because we'll have a meeting beginning of the week and we'll share what we're working on, and I'll run through everything. I'm working on this, and this, and that's why I'm quiet this week and I'm not talking to you, because these are like important items that I want to build and create. And now you say it out loud, I don't necessarily turn around to them and ask them to do the same. So it's a good point. You just maybe realize something. So yeah, I could be better there. But yeah, like just want to touch on the point you just said as well, which is it's so easy to fall into the urgent task as well, what you're saying, because not only you put under stress to complete it, often the case, and people around you are trying to do it, but I think people, again, you ignore there's such you ignore the fact there's a dopamine hit, and there's such easy reward and value to complete an urgent task, because it happens now. You tick a box, you get a dopamine hit. The problem with important tasks is you don't get that payoff until 4 years from now. Right. And so if you've become addicted to the dopamine hit of completing urgent tasks, which is very standard in specialty operations, you're in trouble. And it can happen. So yeah, it's just interesting to say that, of like, often when you sit down and say, what is urgent versus what is important versus what is both, they're very separate categories, and yet you find yourself always in the urgent one.
Yeah, I mean, the example that I always give when I do it with coaches is the first one that goes in important and urgent is have to be at every scrim. And my question is always, really? There's this like we have to be every single second that your team is practicing as a team, you have to be there. And maybe you think it's true, but I would say something's gone a bit wrong if you have to be there for anything useful to happen. If you can't think that whatever team you're a part of, whether it's a direct team like an esports team, or it's your team if you're the head of video or marketing or whatever, if you think that there's nothing that the team can accomplish without you being there, then I think there's probably some steps that have gone on wrong before we're at this stage.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned obviously a lot of things, and kind of in a way the answer to this question is everything we've talked about. But considering you mentioned the fact that you like to be kind of clear with it, from the CEO down to the cleaner, what is your impact on the performance of the teams after you've already got them?
Me personally.
You personally.
It always makes you have to become so self-aware in the situation to really try to think. I think a lot of my work goes into the start and creation of the team. So if I am putting together the perfect team, I'm given the budget, we're working on the budget, we're working on what financially we can make happen, and then we turn to, with that budget in mind, what are our achievable goals? I'm talking very specific, like indicator goals, what trophies are achieved, what amount of winning is achieved. And then it's the next step. Okay, we've got that. Now, Lars, come sit with me. Let's work out. We know our Falcons DNA. What are the niches towards this team we're trying to create based on our understanding of the game, based on our understanding of the network of the game, what players are available, etc. What can we achieve from your philosophy point of view? Okay, now we go into the hiring. We get to the coach. Then we'll go get the players with the coach if we're given that ideal situation. And at that point, this team's created and its foundations are strong. Its foundations allow Lars to start really doing his work. It allows the players and the coaches to grow together and believe in Falcons as a whole, to help them just be more passionate and strong for the brand. And then a lot of my work will shift towards, I'm trying to think of the word, I guess continuation is the word. Like Lars is perhaps doing the direct applicable growth along with the coach. I'm often trying to help grow the coaches. So that's what I try and do. And it'll often be from a process point of view, it'll be from a tracking point of view, goal tracking point of view, it'll be from a sort of relationship with the players point of view, how they manage their relationship with the players. But even then now, to be honest, with where I'm at, the general manager, we've got a guy called Jordan who's absolutely brilliant. He's doing a lot of that now, and he's doing a lot of the tracking of the players. And to be honest, a lot of my work is then going, right, we've made the team, foundations are great. Lars, you go do your work, you kill it. Jordan, you go do that work for Spain. I'm now going to go work on the next strategy item for Falcons, which might involve a new team. So my direct impact is probably seen a lot less directly on teams than it used to be, because I'm doing things behind the scenes like budgets and operational systems and things that keeps Falcons ticking, but also in a way that is just ensuring the players are put in the best position possible to compete, through good setups to the coaches, through good setups to the general manager, through good work with Lars, maintaining Lars and make sure the work he's doing is right. So yeah, it's sometimes hard to put into words, because it's just, I'm at a level now where I'm probably making a 1% impact directly on the team each month, whereas Lars and Jordan, the coach, are making 20-30% impact. But it still matters. It matters.
I also think clarity and alignment, the kind of stuff you're talking about, is a lot more important than we give it credit for, like especially over a longer term. And I think so many organizations crumble because there's just a real lack of clarity of like who exactly is doing what, where exactly are we going, and how are we kind of even measuring how we get there. So I do think it's really, it can be really like day to day important as well, but it's, again, it's one of those things. It's important, it's not necessarily urgent, you're not.
That's it.
Or like
I'm gonna say I don't know why I enjoy it. I'm grateful for the fact that I enjoy that kind of aspect of like understanding why things are being successful with our teams, and therefore taking that and trying to apply elsewhere, helping the entire company be on the same page. It's very operational mode thinking. It's kind of irrelevant, the fact that it's esports. It's engineering and operations, right? So for whatever reason, I enjoy that. Some people won't. I enjoy it, and I think that's what works in this role now. Is day to day. I'm not having direct impact team, but I make sure just everyone is chugging along towards the goal that we said would be our goal. And it's a lot of fun to see the payoff in a year's time. I described the Dota event we won in ESL Birmingham recently. It was kind of like my first ever truly major trophy, especially to do in the UK. And I describe it as like 8 years work for 3 seconds payoff. 3 seconds of trophy up, trophy down, bosh. That's 3 seconds. That's what this job is. With the players, they're getting perhaps impact every scrim. They're winning a scrim. That's some sort of reward, etc. For me, that's now the payoff. It's years of work to see a moment happen, but it's so worth it. And that's the important work, not the urgent work.
Yeah, and I think we have a tendency in all areas, not just in esports, to, I think, I'm trying to think of the exact way that I saw someone phrase it recently. I was watching a TED talk about it, where they were talking about the way that we think about managers and the way that we characterize good management. It's like if you're watching someone swim across a river, like a really fast flowing river, and there's one person who gets in and they try really, really hard, and they're almost swept away, and they're like absolutely powering it, they're giving absolutely everything, and they finally make it to the other end, and they're like collapse on the other bank, or even they have to come back to this bank, they collapse, and it's like we point at them and say, oh, what fantastic effort, what great management. And then you have another person who's walking up and down the bank, and then they get in at the exact right moment, and the current pulls them across. They don't have to do the effort. There's none of the extra thing, and then they get out on the other side, and we just say, "Yeah, well, it looks easy." And
looks easy. Yeah, it looks easy. That's the thing.
This guy's point is like you notice when managers come in and solve a crisis, they often get. That's when books are written about them, when they solved a bunch of crises. But when there's never a crisis because the management has been good from the start, that's the type of management that is ignored, at least from a storytelling point of view, and therefore we tend to idolize the people who are busy.
That's the turnaround, right? You turned a company around. You saved this. You recovered this. It makes for such good writing, talking. That's what people want to hear. No one wants to hear the person that I built this thing, and 5 years later it's going great because it's been successful for 5 years. And it's like, well, maybe we want to know about your background, otherwise we don't really care. So it's a very good point, and it's very easy as well, like to look upon. I think using that example is perfect of like, you look upon the person who spent a long time choosing where to go into the bank and figuring out the best way, and then it goes across and go, not only was that easy, but like that wasn't much work, and anyone could do that, and you start to trivialize it, right? Which is very understandable because it's just your way of understanding how something can be done because you can't envisage how you've done it. Whereas the guy who's working insane hard, you're like, I can do that, right? So you trivialize the other thing, but actually, because of the fact maybe they've spent years growing to understand where's the best place to jump into the bank, maybe they have just put in so much work into the pre-building of whatever they're creating. In this case, you know, I've spent an hour figuring out where to jump in on the bank rather than going straight in. You know, that is the hard work, and that's the work that doesn't get seen, and the payoff is then you're just going with it and you're just continuing it forward, and eventually the payoff comes as long as you don't lose sight of that fact. But yeah, people don't want to see it, and it's a mistake I see in esports companies because I've been a hand in myself. It's like, here's a clear 2, 3, 4 year plan for you to go from where you are now to winning everything in 4 years if you're willing to stick with it. Can we believe in this now? Yes, we believe in it. Great, cool, let's start it. And be like a year in. Where's the payoff? I'm like, well, it's not been 3 years yet. Everything's going fine. No. We need to do something. We need to change this. We need to, and panic. Oh, urgency. Oh, no, we're not working hard enough. We can. I'm sure we can do it now. Like, let's do this. And it's just like, no. If you stick the course and you follow and again, everyone's on the same belief path and system, it works. But it takes time to get to that point. And in esports, sometimes in sports as well, you can very easily see. I'm sorry to any fans of it. It's the Manchester City versus the Manchester United example. It's been very clear for the last 10 years now. Manchester United have been going for short-term wins in manager selections, player hirings, the way they're trying to move on the pitch, what they're doing with the stadium, etc. Versus Manchester City, who, don't get me wrong, of course they have massive budgets, but have very clearly from day one figured out how in 10 years' time they're going to win everything in English football, and have stuck to that premise, and you can just see the difference. But day to day, you wouldn't think that. And ironically, Manchester City now winning everything doesn't make for a good story. Doesn't make for good. I mean, they put the what was it? They put it on Amazon Prime. More people wanted to watch, the other stories of teams that fought against the current or whatever than they want to watch the Manchester City story. So it is. I've rambled a bit there, but it is that idea of like people don't see it happening until there's a payoff at the end, and then they trivialize it because they couldn't figure out how it was done, and it looked easy because nothing went wrong. So they trivialize it. And actually, nothing going wrong was a sign of someone who's damn good at their job.
Yeah, and people who are able to, come back to what we spoke about before, people who are able to finish without spending 100 hours a week or whatever it is on your thing. And I mean, it's the same everywhere, but I see it so much in coaching in esports where people are. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. There are many people who have bragged to me about how little they sleep and about how much, how many hours they work. And I'm like, this is
That's not fun.
Shameful admittance, surely, rather than a bragging situation.
I think the bragging should be, I can do what you do in 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like, I know it sounds stupid, but it's like, or I can, sorry, maybe not even that. I can achieve the same goals that you have in 8 hours of work a day because of how we're approaching it. Like, it's not, for whatever reason, we do celebrate that kind of thing. Just as a culture, as a species, we celebrate like that same hard work. It's like, my personal belief is that you will get a better employee, you will get better people who are having a bit of a social life, having a bit of a personal life, like getting good sleep, all these things. But we kind of, in certainly in esports, you see it in some sport and certainly some traditional jobs of like trivializing that aspect, and hours equals results, and it's just like the worst approach you can take. Because again, it's short-term thinking. You might get the most out of employee, but they're going to quit in 2 years because it's not sustainable, and they're going to hate you for it, and you're not going to be able to employ someone new who can replace them because they're going to hear about it, and it's just always short-term thinking.
Yeah, and especially for people in management positions, where I truly believe so much of your job as a coach, especially when you're there all the time, is to give energy and direction and leadership and that kind of thing. And you can't give energy if you don't have energy. If you don't take care of yourself and you don't sleep well, and then the first thing that goes is your decision making. And so we have to just be a lot more, precise, I think maybe is the way to think about it, with how am I spending my time? Where am I inefficient with my time, and where, how should that change? And I think that's really, really important.
You have to hold yourself to account. Like, it's so easy to talk about this and not live by it. And there were times in the past, as the case for me, I always use the example of like, my sleep schedule sucked and I ate terrible food. And my sleep schedule a lot better now, and I kind of still eat terrible food, but I go to the gym 3 times a week with a personal trainer now, which is something I never did, because I'm like, how can I tell players to be looking after themselves and doing so? How can I expect my coaches and my head of performance to be putting in a cultural system of everyone here is healthy and everyone here is work hard, and I'm not doing it? You have to hold yourself to account and hold yourself to the same belief system. And it's funny how when you do those kind of things, not only do you feel so much more enjoyment out of your work, but again, the passion comes with it, and you suddenly realize you love what you do even more. But yeah, it's you have to hold yourself to account at all times on these ideas as well. You can't just talk about it.
So you mentioned a few times this idea of a multi-year plan, where we're going to get to, or even talking like 10 years or something like that. Obviously, you can't give everything away, but how do you go about building a multi-year plan?
It very much depends on the organization I'm with. So like right now at Falcons, it's been a very different experience because it was much more around the brand being built as opposed to say just getting teams and winning trophies and such. I will always try and sit down with whoever is my boss, CEO or manager, whatever it is, and figure out, right, ballpark, what is your goal for this organization? Forget a length of time. Like, what do you want to achieve? And let's work backwards from that. Okay, great. I now understand your goal is now this for the company. Right. Secondarily, what is your goal for me? Like, why are you hiring me? I have my ideas, but like, why are you hiring me out? Because we want to achieve this. Right, cool. So I've now got the main goal of the company, and I've got what their expectation is of me, and I try and work backwards from that, and I try to build upon it. I don't want just ever their expectation of me to be that's it, that's what I'll do. But between those two things combined, I always try and set out a 1 year, 2 year, and then 5 year clear steps. I won't present it all at once. So with Falcons, like the goal for me joining was very much around bringing the brand of Falcons from from Middle East to Europe, and ideally the global, it's a more global setup, not just Europe. And so we had a 1 year goal, which was all around the strategy of the brand, how we would do brand entry, what games we would enter, why we'd enter them, and how we'd approach those games, and all the operational stuff behind it. And you'll notice that it's easy to forget. My first year of Falcons, like everyone sees Falcons, at least I hope so. Everyone sees Falcons as a fairly known brand globally now. It's very easy to go just 12 months ago. Actually, not even 12 months. Like back in like October, November, all we had was a Counter-Strike team, right? And more than 12 months ago, that Counter-Strike team was like a no shoots to players. I think they know it's like it was a tier 2 Counter-Strike team in the French league. And we built upon it in July, and it got bigger and bigger, of course, earlier on, quickly. But we weren't in a lot, and we pursued that because the first year was how is the strategy of the brand. Year 2 was about now taking that step, producing that brand entry into the global scene, entering our esports, executing on new staff hires, whatever it may be, to get to that point so that the brand's global before what we thought at the time was going to be Games 8 2024, now the World Cup. We've done that now. And I think Falcons is one of the biggest brands globally as a result of our entries and how we've approached it. I've now got, and I will be presenting. It might be a surprise to my boss, maybe saying on the podcast, but I'm literally next week presenting the 3-year strategy now of where I see now Falcons going, because I've achieved my goal. In my opinion, my goal was to bring the Falcons brand to the global setup. And now it goes, right, what is the next stage for me? And my goals for you is to still achieve your overall arching Falcons goal. And then secondarily, here is my 3-year strategy of now what I believe can help you achieve that big goal and what I think your expectation of me should be. And I'm about to present this. He's going to hate me because it's like 20 pages long, but I've got this big 20-page thing of like 3 different strategies of the next 3 years, how aggressive we want to go, what direction we want to go, what do we want to achieve, etc. So I've always tried to work backwards, and I've always tried to have a 1-year step, a 2-year step, and then present a what will then be 5-year step, another 3 years. for what they achieve. And the reason I'm enjoying Falcons so much is they want to see it through, which is so nice to see. So yeah, it's actually a very good. We've got the World Cup in a month, but it's actually extremely critical time because we're now figuring out what our next major strategy shift is to continue to take Falcons to the top, and it's exciting to be a part of that.
And how important is it having those 1 year and 2 year as well as the kind of 5 year thing? Because what I see, and maybe it's just because obviously we've been close for a while, like that kind of multi-year thing is spreading, but I don't see many people saying, okay, yeah, I've got a 5 year plan. Year one is this. They just stay on the 5 years or whatever. So
That's
how
it.
important is it to have those early wins? Is that a way to think about them?
I mean, I think it's right. Was it the meme on me was the 2-year plan, wasn't it? That you could take any esports team in 2 years from nothing to sort of world championship level. And people used to follow the ideas or take that meme or whatever it is want to do. I'd seen it plenty before me. But the point was, it's so easy to go. Let's use a team example, right? We're nothing right now, and in 2 years' time, we want to qualify for a world championship. Cool, great, congratulations! You've got your 2-year strategy. You've got your 2-year goal. What's the strategy to get there? And everyone goes, just what we do. It's so easy to set goals, and it's so hard to set the activation and execution on getting there. It's again, I'm so thankful to have Lars with me because he's so good at working with me on this stuff. How you take a team from 0 to 100% with someone like him, with someone like me, etc. What is in 2 years, right? 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Let's do that. And what's a goal at each step? And what are the executional requirements to achieve that goal? And what does success of that goal look like? And what does failure of that goal look like? And if there's failure of that goal, what is the shift in strategy to achieve the next goal, right? Like, how do we get back on track? So you're setting yourself little points of reviewing, I guess, the goal, but reviewing your point of progression towards the goal. You're adapting to how you'll reach that goal because nothing ever goes to perfect plan, does it? So you're adapting your response, resources, whatever it may be, to reach that 2-year goal. And where necessary, just double checking the executional points. It's so easy to forget because, again, it's just like, it's so easy to go, right, we're going to do this thing over the next 2 weeks, tick a box, that's dopamine hit, or we're going to achieve this goal in 4 years' time. And the linkage is just not existing. And it's the linkage that makes you a top tier esports organization, same in traditional sport. How you go from step A to step B. And for me, that's, in a sense, it's a trade secret that's just through arguably learning by failure over many years of career, whether it's been on the company side or whether it's been on my personal side of what I've seen in that. I've come to understand how you go from 0 to 100% in terms of setting a strategy and what the goals look like. Just the process, how you go from day 1 to day 365. It's just something I feel comfortable and able to do now. So yeah, but if someone asked me how did you learn that, someone asked me how do you do it, it feels hard to put into words because it's just something that's kind of innately I've learned. Again, I think it leans a bit more on my degree and background as well, which helps. But mixture of, as I said, mixture of seeing through failure what's worked and what hasn't, seeing how other companies and other industries work and make it happen, seeing who's successful business, reading. It's a whole bunch of things that will come together to figure out how you do it.
Yeah, there's a guy, I think Russell Rummelt is his name, who's a expert in business strategy, and he has this phrase: people say getting to the top of the mountain is the strategy, but it's not. It's how
That's
we
the
get
goal.
there.
Yeah, how the hell do we get there? Exactly. It's a common occurrence again in esports. So I think, and traditional sport as well to an extent. If you come in and you go like, this is what we're achieving. Here's a bunch of money. Go do it. And it's just like, it's not that simple. And sports and esports has taught us, the cheat codes to winning, such as massive budget or huge brand, hence attracts the best players, doesn't always work. Doesn't always work, and it's because that execution is missing, and you need the right people there to execute what you're doing.
Do you think as well there's something in the fact that learning from those experiences where you have a 5 year plan and after however long the organization, the pressure builds and they're like, no, we have to change everything. Like, we need something now. Do you think that's maybe also led you to this idea of, okay, look, we need all the steps so that when you come and panic, I can point to the steps that we agreed on and show us that
Yeah,
we've done those steps. It's like we need a
it
win in
was
1 year.
it was a little bit too much in my head in the first day, so that makes sense. It's like, right, 2-year plan, guys. Day one, here's how we're doing it, right? Like from day one, here's how we're getting to your plan. Here's our philosophy. Here's what we're standing by. Here's the kind of people we're going after. Like, here's this. And then I wouldn't lay out a clear action plan to communicate to the people that matter, those who own the money, basically. It would all be in my head. And on my head, I'd be like 6 months in, like, we're on track, right? And then you get that call being like, what the hell's going on? I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, we haven't done this. I'm like, everything's fine. And so, yeah, I've learned myself that communication of that is important. I felt good at communicating our entire goal from top to bottom. As I said, like the cleaner and the CEO understanding what the target of our teams are. I was very good at that, but I wasn't actually very good at communicating. I might have known how I felt to do it, but I didn't communicate well the steps to get there. And look, perhaps you don't need everybody in the company always understanding that aspect, because you want the philosophy and the goal still to be like the main target point. But you need to, as a board, as a C-suite, if it's with a team, team and players, you need to all understand these steps of day one to day whatever, how we're getting there. And yeah, that was a very big learning point for me. Is like, how do I track that? How do I state that and communicate it? How do I track it? And then how do I show measurables that we're achieving? And how do I show numbers to go, look, we're on target. You can see on this graph, because it's very hard to put performance ability into graphical, numerical form sometimes, outside of just showing results, which is not a way to measure how you're doing at all. So yeah, it was a big learning point for me. I think it was a big part of my time at Excel actually was learning that and understanding that aspect.
So, how do you try and find a way to quantify those steps? Because I was talking on the podcast to a guy called Simon Cox, who was a director of performance in sport for 30 years. So, he was building Olympic programs in four different countries. And he was based in rowing. And he said, now moving into esports, that's the thing that's the hardest. Because in rowing, it was like, right, this is the Olympic medal winning time. This is our time. This is how far away we are. And hopefully every year you can see us gradually build to that so that in 10 years we do win medals, which he has done. So how do you go about doing that in esports, especially because you now work with loads of different esports? You talked about Falcons being a global brand. It seems like every week it's like a new esport, and also a new esport that's doing really, really well. So when you don't know all the details of whatever the new game might be, or even in the games that you know well, how do you try and lay out those steps so that you can kind of effectively manage up, as it were, so that the people above you are not kind of panicking? Because, take a game like League of Legends, because it's a snowball based game, you can be 1% worse and it looks horrible by the end, because if you're 1% worse at every decision, you lose the game, by 10k gold lead or whatever it might be. So how do you kind of quantify that other than just we placed a little bit higher in different events? Or
Yeah, exactly. I think placing higher end event stuff is a very poor way to quantify it, because that's not actually showing how you're getting there, right? It's not showing you what if someone said, right, hey, we're winning more. Someone went, why? And you go, just are. It's like, well, then you're not measuring it, are you? So it's not an easy thing to do. I personally rely on a lot of quantifying the output and performance of my staff, right? So putting players aside, coaches, the managers, the staff around them, and seeing their actionable growth as individuals as a good way to quantify we're headed in the right direction. Because again, if we believe our goal system is around everyone being my traditional, everyone's probably fed off me saying, but my thing's always been everyone on the same page is one of my biggest morals. I can quantify that aspect by understanding if my staff are growing through setting them clear targets, clear goals, clear indicators where and putting measurable actions to those. That's one way I do it. There's a couple of other ways. Like I admittedly haven't got that going in Falcons yet, but I know in previous organizations around, like softwares I've tried to have built to help measure, measure from an in-game perspective the teams and how we're doing. So at least we have quantifiable software that shows, oh, our players are performing at this level, but here's a clear graphical representation of how they're improving as an individual. And I know it's not that simple. It's incredibly nuanced, because the issue with esports is every game is so varied that it's quite hard to measure. But at least that provides a much better representation than just we got second, then we got first. And then thirdly, it will just come down to what is my individual strategy goals with the C-suite, with the board, is very different at Falcons to what it was at Guild, to what it was at Excel. So as a result of what we've set in place, part of that will be, right, let's sit down and discuss remember what I said about like what do we see as success, what do we view as success? Okay, if that's what we view as success, how do we quantify that? So I've got a very specific set for Falcons that's very different to what I have for Guild, that we are looking to measure and see benefit. Falcon said it's about global brand presence. It's quite a large part of it. So you can imagine there are some very simple measurables around that aspect, for example. So there are ways to do it, but you need to make sure you have. I always forget the term. Sorry, it's not like aggressive versus passive measurables. There's a phrase that dependent or independent measurables. But you need to make sure it's a measurable that what you're measuring has an impact on the team. So, for example, if I'm measuring a player's, let's just say in a video game, a player's gold output, right, and how that's improving game by game, that gold output is a very clear measurable that is showing, like, it provides him benefit in the game. If he's earning more gold, he plays better. Now, if I'm measuring if they got third versus second versus first, and that's my measurement system, that measurable is not providing me any information on why we're getting there, nor is it actually a representation of actual growth, right? It's not trying to go, right, because we got third and now we've got second, that means you've achieved this. Whereas if you got 1,000 gold and you got 1,500 gold, I can say it's because you've started doing this in game and it had a clear impact on the game. So I think I've described that incredibly poorly. But effectively, there are ways to have like actionable measurables versus passive measurables, and you want to make sure you have as many actionable measurables as possible, because that's what makes you understand what's going on and the work you're doing is having a genuine effect. There is a phrase. It's not called actionable and passive. There is an actual set of phrases for the two kinds of measurable, and I've completely forgotten what it's called, but it's something I do a lot. This is where you save me, John, and tell me what they are.
I don't, unfortunately. This is one that I don't.
I might just Google it aside while you ask the next question.
Yeah, I'll stall for a bit while you while you go through that. I think as well, it's also so important to have these kind of variables that are wherever possible based on our own performance or based on ourselves in a way, because of course, end of the day, competitive high performance, you could get twice as good in the next month and then play against someone who got 2.1 times as good as they were, and suddenly your performance goes down, or someone's ill on one day, or something's gone wrong in a different area that's like completely out of our control. Of course, in sport, you could be training for 4 years for the Olympics and then get injured the week before. So there is some aspect of luck to it, and that's always going to impact things. But trying to find a way to minimize how much it impacts your measurables, I guess, would be a way to think about it.
No, absolutely. It's you got to get a bit lucky sometimes. Again, great example is the Dota tournament one. Maureen got his visa the day the tournament started. He didn't even play in the first set of matches. And you could say a little bit of luck that it came through when it did. And it's like, okay, sure, like that happened. But assuming he hadn't come along, what was our process for the substitute, and how are we working towards them ensuring had the best performance possible to ensure we still had a best start, and we still had like a top 3 goal in mind with the sub, so like obviously luck will help, but at the end of the day, you can always build systems and process and measurables that manage the luck as best it can. Like sports is a long play game, right? Like well, certainly esports anyway, like you have 20 competitions over the year or 10 competitions over the year. It is rare to get 10 first places, right? And that's because in one tournament someone got sick, and one tournament V's got this, and but if you're winning 7 out of the 10, that's insane. That's absolutely insane, and that comes down to your processes. So it does also come down to like playing the long game. Like, it's rare to say you can win everything all the time everywhere, but if you're winning 70-80% of it, that means you have an incredibly successful team, and that's where you kind of minimize the luck, is because sometimes stuff will just go wrong, and you have to accept that that's not your tournament.
Now, we've spoken there about you kind of managing up to the C-suite, making sure that everyone's aware of the goals and stuff like that. One thing I wanted to ask you is, how do you want your coaches to best kind of manage up to you, if that's a question that kind of
Mhm.
can be asked. Now, obviously, I'll preface this by saying a lot of times, especially in the situations that I'm familiar with, especially when you go a little bit lower down the tiers, a lot of things that coaches want from the people who are running the departments is the stuff that you're already talking about, is the clarity, is the clear like goals, is the understanding and support in certain areas. But if there is there any advice that comes to mind for coaches who are working with people like yourself that you think, okay, look, if you're not getting clarity from me, I want you to just tell me. Is that a good one because you think you provided
100%.
it? Or
Ask for what you need. If you don't have clarity, if you don't have the goals, if you don't understand what's being achieved, if you don't feel a part of the business, you need to ask. You don't like, and look, it's easy said and done because it depends on the kind of boss you have. But certainly in my case, I always try to, my weekly catch ups with coaches and stuff like that. I always round out. I was like, right, and what can I do for you this week? And what can I do for you? And is that just a question where you need something fixing, or is that we need a resource, or how can we support? And I do try. I think the coaches will say I do it. I sometimes forget to do it, but I do always try and go. How am I doing? Am I? Are you getting what you need from me? And how is Falcons or wherever team with you? How is Falcons doing? What do you like about Falcons? What are you disliking? What are we not being good enough at? You can't afford to have ego. You can't afford to have this idea that I'm better than you or we're doing everything right. I was like, forget all of that. Me and the coach here, we're at the same level. Right. I need you to do these things. What do you need me to do? Right? Like, that's what I'm here for. My position now is about supporting the coaches and giving them the best chance they can to give their players the best chance they can. So that is what I try and do on the regular is ask them, are you getting everything you need from me? And what's going bad? What do you need from me or what do you need from Falcons?
yeah, and it ties back to the thing we were talking about before, where it's not malice. If you're not getting the thing you need from your boss, it's not because they know what you need and they're trying to deny it from you so that you do badly. Like it's just because they don't know. And it's that classic thing of
Yeah.
we teach people how to treat us. And for so many years, esports coaches and head coaches in particular have taught esports organizations that we want to be left alone. And I don't think
Yeah.
that's actually the case. I think people want
No.
support and they want clarity and they want alignment on what our actual goals are and why are we doing this? What's some sort of passion for the jersey or the brand or however you want to describe it. So even that, just ask, ask for the
Yeah.
things that you need.
And it will help with your relationship with the coaches to then give input on what you think the case needs to be occurring or helping, whatever it may be. What you just said there about esports coaches almost taught to, that we don't want to be touched is very true, and I've worked with those coaches too many a time, and I found that by me going in and going, what can I do better, what can I do for you, how can I help you, and really force the communication in that sense and show that I'm trying to work on it. Don't always achieve it, but show that, like, I've tried to do that, I've done this, I've tried to do that. That it builds up a position and you go, right, I've done these things for you. Can you now do these things for me? And it might be, can you, let Lars in a little bit more? Could you work with performance this side? Could you, come do this content item with us? But it helps you balance it. If you've got someone who is a little bit closed off and a little bit of a barrier, the best way you can approach it is to just have an open relationship with each other in terms of your communication and the way you want to work together. I will work for you if you work for me, and it's really is not that. It's really that simple. I know it sounds stupid to say out loud, but it really is that simple.
Yeah, and I think as well, like so many coaches who have an organization that's kind of distant, they act as if that's what the organization wants. But almost always, again,
No.
it's the same as us. You're saying no one gets into esports for I want to make loads of money. No one starts an esports organization because they want to make loads of money. They start esports organizations because they love esports. They want to be
Yeah.
involved. They want to be there, but they know that we're all dealing with esports PTSD. Like their previous coach was very angry whenever they came into the room, so they
That's
stopped
it.
coming into the room so much. So if you want to build that relationship, and I think everyone listening to this should try and build that relationship, but kind of coming from either side is okay. And it's fine to go to someone who is effectively your boss and say, I'd like to have weekly catch-ups with you. Is that all right? If they don't do that by themselves, and maybe it's quote unquote better to come from the top down, but it doesn't matter as long as we then get on the same page.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with what you've just said there. Couldn't agree more.
You've mentioned a few times, books or things that you've learned from experience, but how do you develop yourself in your role? Like, how have you done it in the past, or how do you continue to do it?
I mean, that is a hard question, isn't it? Because it's not loud. Um, there's a real, I think you have to have a real ideology that you can always be better. You can always be better at anything you do. That every day I wake up and I go, hey, I've got these 100 things to do, but also at the end of the day, what did I do well? What did I, more importantly, not do well, and why? It's just I don't want to say it's an innate approach, but it's almost like it is just almost like a life approach of just wanting to be the best person you can be. I just have such a weird fascination with, like, I just want to be the best human I can be. And in my mind, that means I am learning every day. That's my personal opinion of what makes the best human. Just I'm willing to learn every day. And that could be on some hobby or some, I don't know, general knowledge quiz, or it could be about my job and what I'm trying to do. And there's loads of different approaches, reading books, watching podcasts, just learning through knowledge that's available to you on the outside. And then there is your daily receiving knowledge through making mistakes, through seeing mistakes of others around you, through seeing things that are successful and learning why that was successful around you or what you achieved successfully. Learn by doing, right? That's the best phrase, learn by doing. And if you're lucky enough to be in an organization where you're allowed to make mistakes and you're allowed to mess up, and again, I've been very lucky in some previous orgs that's been the case, you will grow so fast. If you have the right mindset to be willing to see as you make a mistake why it happened, what happened. Maybe a mentor takes through it, maybe figure out yourself. So it's just a mindset to want to approach how you are as a person like that, I think. And for some people, that's a huge thing for them. They get a lot of enjoyment for it. For some people, that's of no interest to them, and that's fine, right? And that's fine. But in that case, high performance sport probably isn't the career path I'd put you on. I think it's just where you fit as a person, and for me, that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, especially esports. I mean, the fact that it's so dynamic and changes so quickly. The Olympic Committee put out a list of 10 attributes that good head coaches should have, or maybe even they just said good coaches. And they had something like number 2 was sponge for knowledge, or however they
Mm.
phrased it, this idea of being a lifelong learner. And I think in esports, to be honest, if anything, that would be number 1, because it's just so much more dynamic as a space. Nothing is set, everything's changing. The game is changing. Even if you're in direct contact with a game, those games are changing. And at least for me, I've found that kind of feeding my curiosity or practicing that, it's felt like that itself was a skill. So I like learning and I like finding new things more
That's
now
it.
than I did. And this last few years, especially, like, it's just completely compounded. And having that, as we were talking about before, making space to, how am I going to push myself today? How am I going to learn something new? Conversations with people and all this kind of thing. And the more you do it, the more you will like doing it. And the advice I always give people is, just like you were saying with hobbies, start with something that you're naturally interested in, and you'll gradually learn that. You'll gradually learn that skill of learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Mm.
Exactly. I mean, there's this, even like, if you just think from an extremely practical sense towards sport and esport as well. Like, let's say I've learned this brand new way to play this video game, and so therefore, bang, that new system comes in, and we won every trophy this year as well. For next year, what that means is everybody's doing that, right? Like, sports and esports does not give you the space to not grow, right? You do not have that privilege. The person who grows the fastest will win stuff that year. And if you continue to stay at the fastest, you will continue. But if you grow, I think you said earlier, you grow 10% this year and everyone grows 5%, you've won everything by a bit more. But if you now grow at 5% next year and everyone else grows at 10%, bear in mind they have the knowledge of what you did last year. They're now ahead of you, right? Because everyone's put on the same level playing field after 6 to 12 months, because everything you've done has been learned, right? So you constantly have to be looking for new strategies, new ideas, new ways to grow, new ways to develop from things from the outside, from people around you, from by doing yourself. And when it comes to esports, like we lucky that we have such a vast wealth of knowledge of sport take from that we've seen. Let's not forget 5, 6 years ago, a sports psych was only just starting with organizations for the first time, and now if you ever mention that a team doesn't have a performance person, you'd be like, well, you're not winning this year, so that's how quickly things come normalized, and we have to keep growing. So yeah, you have to want to do it to survive in esports or sport. Just to be blunt, like you have to have a thirst for knowledge and thirst for learning, or this is not an industry for you.
And I think, I can't remember where I was asked the question of like, how does someone learn? And I think in this day and age, you mentioned podcasts, books, all these kind of things. There's there's just so much information out there that for me, that's never really the right question. It's more, what of the million things that I could learn should I learn is
Should I?
it's a better question. And for me, I think it's really important as well when you are learning something, if you're getting into reading or you listen to audiobooks or podcasts or whatever, or again, love conversations. I learned so much from all of these podcasts. That's why I keep doing them. To find a way to try and implement some form of it or think about it kind of a bit more deeply. The acquisition of knowledge can bring a lot of satisfaction, but it's the application that can bring you that like fulfillment, that next stage. And that's where it like really goes in. That's when you talk about it with someone else, you remember so much more of it. If you start to implement it or teach it to someone else, then we remember like 90%. And that's where it starts to get really exciting. And that's the thing that then just snowballs and keeps driving you forward.
Exactly. It's not too dissimilar to what we were just saying earlier about like, you want to learn this new thing, you think it's going to take you 3 months, great. How do you get there? What's the strategy of learning for you? Is it books? Is it talking? Is it sit down with yourself and learn? Sit down with yourself and write down how you're going to learn to get to that point. It's the same. It's always the same thing of like, what's the execution of it, right? So we say, I want to learn how to throw a dart at a dartboard today. It's like, cool. How are you going to execute that? That's always the most important question. So yeah, it's again, when you think about esports perspective, we need to keep learning new things to be the best team possible. Right, we'll sit down and talk about execution and strategy for that. Who are we going to speak to? What are we going to read? What talks are we going to go to? What are we going to try in the team, and how we're going to measure that? You have to keep doing these things to figure it out.
Yeah, and when people ask me, why esports as opposed to anything else, is often one of the answers that I give is that we're in this space where it's young enough and small enough that we're in these small companies or we're in these very small teams. If you're a head coach of a team, you're not even concerned with the rest of the company. And yet we also have the budget or the space to do the things as well. It's like if you were in a tiny sport that no one cared about, then maybe, you can come up with something new and you can actually push things forward. Whereas when you're in football, the chances are that you're going to find a way to be 1.5 times as more efficient as everyone in the world is really, really rare. But in esports, there's a possibility, and we also have the space to actually try it. So it's really just taking advantage of the environment that we're all in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to gradually come to the end. And at the end of these podcasts, I've been asking everyone the same set of quickfire questions. I always do this little spiel as to why, but it's to show that there are so many people in so many different positions in esports that have come to it from their own very unique perspective and their own very unique set of experiences. So I just love kind of exploring that in a shorter form way. So the first question is, who are the people that you look up to or idolize, either now or early on in your career? They don't have to be from esports, just people in general.
There was a whole bunch of football people. Football was my thing when I was younger in terms of watching it. So I did very much idolize Sir Alex Ferguson and the way he worked, the way he behaved, and what he was trying to achieve to get this dynasty for Manchester United that he got. So I think that really got me going in sport, was kind of Manchester United and Ferguson back in the day. That was a big part. I do have one from esports as well. Like I actually I had a lot of time and idolization of Steve from Team Liquid. Because I'd make the argument they were kind of one of the original big organization back in the day. And when I first got into League of Legends, like I was a TL supporter from day one. I loved the team they had, but I very much loved the way I thought that he was putting information out on social media about Liquid and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve. And I think they were very much one of the early movers towards a more successful business as an esports org. So I took a lot of learnings from the way he was approaching business as well. So yeah, it's like you had like so Alex Fergus for the competitive side, Steve, I guess, from a more esports business side. I don't really say I have direct like business people I idolize. I've forgotten his name though. There is one I follow. You know him, Simonek.
Oh,
What's
Simon
his name?
Sinek.
Simon
Start
Sinek.
with Y.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I followed him a long time and a lot of his podcasts, and I feel like he has a real unique view on how to approach running a business culturally, right? Culturally, talking about how you work with your employees and how people work and how people's minds work in a job. So I've always been very, very fascinated by his books and his podcasts, which I feel like are a different way to approach working as a civilization, how we work. So yeah, he's always been a very interesting for me as well.
Yeah, I don't normally. The whole point of quickfire questions is I'm trying to
Sorry.
keep from. No. Sorry, it's not about you. I
I've
meant.
just ranted for I've just rambled for 10 minutes.
No, that's the opposite of what I meant. What I was going to say is the point of quickfire questions is for me to not say something. You can take as long as you want, but I still want to say this one thing.
Oh, go for it.
Which is that he was asked at one point, "What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?" And he once gave.
This is Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek, yeah. He was at a meeting. He was one of the more junior people there, and he, thought the meeting went pretty well. But then afterwards, someone took him aside and said, "Sometimes 3/4 of an answer is better than an answer and a half." I think that's such an actually really useful thing to bear in mind.
Saying that,
myself.
but I think I could probably utilize that quite a lot.
That's definitely something that I've tried and will continue to try because I failed to incorporate. Anyway, next question, and I won't come in with the answer, anything, but do take as long as you want. What is the biggest hardship you've experienced in your career?
Getting let go from CLG. It was the first team I ever worked with. I've spoken about it before. It was I'd taken the plunge to leave my accountancy career to do esports, right, and a lot of change with it. And I'd gone into CLG first split as a team manager. I was meant to do some performance stuff as well, but I did as a team manager. And to be blunt, I was useless. And I'm honest about that fact. Like, it took me a long time to get my head straight to kind of sit back and not be angry and upset and kind of go, they let me go because I was crap. And I sat back and went, during that entire 4-month period with them, I didn't grow myself. I didn't really learn what to do. I didn't ask questions. I let the whole job overwhelm me through people I idolized as stars, was working with, through just the living situation and everything there, just being there all the time. I just allowed day to day to flow without any direction, any planning, any true strategic thinking from myself, right? And sure, like, I could talk about being mentored a bit more or growing a bit more, but ultimately I didn't do a good job and I was let go. And this was my first job in esports, and I've now quit my job. I'm now doing this, and I was very lucky to get another opportunity that then took me forward. And it was the hardest moment of my career, because it was just like, hey, congrats, your first step, you failed, and you failed pretty miserably, and you've now got to return home to nothing, and you've not built anything. And I'm actually incredibly grateful for it, because through me having that hardship so early on in my career made me really reflect and reset hard so much earlier than I think some people might go through, to go, if I'm going to make this successful, this is how I have to be. This is what I need to do. I can't be lazy and I can't take things for granted. So yeah, it was the hardest moment, but it's also, I'm so grateful for it now. Hated it at the time, but I'm grateful now.
And what's the top highlight of your career?
It happened a few weeks ago. It's straight up. There's no better way to say it. Was lifting that Dota trophy at ESL Birmingham was the greatest achievement for me in my career, because it was in front of so many people, because it was a LAN event, because it was in the UK, and because my parents and my mates were in the audience, and nothing be that. And it was just that moment of like, we're lifting a trophy here that is in itself an awesome trophy, but to just do it on home turf and to have my family there who go, like, who've supported me through this career, and be able to kind of have them there wearing, my jersey with my name on, stuff like that, and just be cheering and going, well done, you did it. It just like, it I was a mess, right? Anyone who saw me after we lifted that trophy, I was a mess because it was just a lot of things felt like they come to fruition, reach that moment. And to be honest, like my impact directly on this Dota team has not been loads outside once the team was built. Like, I almost felt a bit of a fraud on stage lifting that trophy with them because I was like, I turned up to join this event to see how I could help. I told their manager, I'm your assistant manager for the week. Tell me how I can help. I'm not here to be a director of esports. Nothing I can do. And so yeah, it was almost like a bit weird to be on there with them, but they're great guys and they really involved me. It's just so nice to have my family there. So yeah, that made it all worth it.
What are 3 non-negotiable behaviors that you and people around you need to buy into?
That's a very good question. Okay, so here's them for me. So number 1 is no ego, right? I've mentioned that a few times in this podcast, but it's so critical because at no point do you develop an ego in the job you're doing. And I refer to ego in the sense of you are not willing to hear opportunities, you're not willing to grow or learn anymore, you are not willing to develop and adapt, and you are willing to tell people what to do and only what to do, right? You stop growing if you develop an ego. And so that for me is a non-negotiable. You cannot have an ego, nor can you have a per se trait that might build an ego in your job. That's number 1. Number 2 is effectively giving it all to the company you are with, right? So what I mean by that is you always come in with me. Say you're coming to work for me, you always come in under our belief system, under our cultural system, under our plans, whatever it may be, right? You believe in our systems and you give everything to that company and to our team, even if you only plan to be here a year because it's a stepping stone, or it's not working out for you because it's been a month and you don't enjoy it, or you plan to be promoted, whatever your personal goals are within this career, that you are going to give everything to our system and what we believe in and grow it with me at all times, even if you have every intention to step away one day. So I think that for me is non-negotiable. I don't care if you see a job as a stepping stone. I don't care if you see it as career progression. I don't mind what your personal goals are. In fact, I'd like to help you with them, as long as you are always giving everything to the team we are with. So that's number 2. I'm just trying to think of the third, to be honest. I don't have many non-negotiables. I like to negotiate with people on what we should do and how we should approach it. So I don't really have a third right now. I'm sure if I think a bit longer, maybe I want to come to my head. But for me, those have been the 2. Is you give everything to the belief system and group you're with, and that you also, I forgot what I said for the first one. Sorry?
You don't have an ego.
No ego. Yeah. And yes, you have no ego at any point.
Great. And then the last question. If you from today could give yourself one piece of advice when you first started your career, what would it be and why?
I'd probably have one comment and then one piece of advice. One comment is keep going. It gets better. Those first few years of esports were not the most fun, and they were tough, and I had to give up and sacrifice a lot, but it was worth it. In terms of advice, I don't know if it's necessarily advice, but because it's like I'm thinking of like CLG before I started CLG versus how I was after, but it was just from day one, don't lose sight of what you want to achieve in esports and don't let the situation overwhelm you. I had all these goals to join esports, then the day one I walked in CLG, it all disappeared because I just kind of, as I said, I let the situation overwhelm me and this, that, and the other, and I've got a bit lazy and all these things. So don't lose sight of what you personally want to achieve. I have my own personal goals in esports, which I've still not achieved yet, and it's nothing to do with trophies. Don't lose sight of that. And I think it's fair to say in the first year I did. I think I've been, since year 2 of my time in esports, I've been pretty good at staying on that. But there've been moments and times. There was a moment before as well, which is for another conversation, where I definitely lost sight of that fact as well. So don't lose sight of why you're doing esports, and there will be tough moments where it doesn't matter, because as long as you don't lose sight.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being so open with the kind of stuff that you're doing.
No worries.
It's great to see, some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes rather than just, entering this, winning this, all that kind of thing. So I think it's absolutely fantastic what you're doing. And yeah, thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. It was good fun.